Welcome to Infinitely Irrational, where we discuss the real, eccentric, and complex history of mathematics.
Brought to you by Mathematical Expressions.
I'm your host, Natalie, the resident math nerd.
And I'm Kay, your researcher of weird things.
In this episode, we'll answer the following questions. How sure are you that you locked your door this morning? Which came first, loaded dice or counting cards? What do either of these have to do with math? Let's find out. Okay, so Descartes.
I think, therefore, I am.
Correct. He's also the dude who gets all the credit for analytic geometry. He's very famous and respected at the time.
Which I have to pause here and say, I had no idea that Descartes was a mathematician in any way, shape, or form. And I have to tell you that I almost minored in philosophy. And until this podcast, I had no idea how mathematics and philosophy were linked. So I guess I failed my first year of college.
Listen, I need to tell you, when we were talking about Descartes, and you said, Descartes, the guy who... And on the tip of my tongue, I was getting ready to say, yeah, the guy that did the Cartesian coordinate system. And then you came out with this.
I would have given you a blank-eyed stare if that's what you came out with.
Well, do you think it's you said philosophy and math you didn't realize were intertwined, and we have another mathematician coming up that is literary, secret, we'll tell you later, but you didn't know that that was mathematical either.
No.
And so do you think it's like horror movies and
Oh, you mean, so what you're saying is, because we've had this conversation before, because I'm a big horror movie fan, listeners. So, yeah, I do kind of think it's that. So with horror movies, right, there's kind of a stigma attached to horror movies. And when there's a good horror movie that comes out, it's like people don't want to say it's a horror movie. And so they say it's a psychological thriller. It's a horror movie.
It's a psychological thriller.
It's scary. Then it's a horror movie. It's meant to be a horror movie. And so, yeah, I think a similar thing is going on here where it's, no, he is a philosopher. He's not a mathematician. Because if we say in any way, shape, or form he is a mathematician to you students, you'll never want to hear anything about him again because there's such a stigma attached to math. That's the only thing I can believe, because I don't understand why no one would have mentioned this to me.
So I'm going to call Descartes and every mathematician from here on out a psychological thriller.
Okay.
This is the podcast of psychological thrillers.
Well, he definitely played some psychological games, as I've learned. He was a bit of a troll, and I'm sure at some point we'll come back around and investigate him some more. But I know for a fact he and Fermat were not friends.
Well, this is probably because some famous mathematician, and I forget who, will have to look it up, but they asked Fermat at the time about something that Descartes has done, like a piece of his work.
So he just stopped him in a hall and said, hey, did you read that thing by Descartes?
Yeah, did you see this? And so Fermat threw some shade. He says, it looks like he's groping about in the shadows, was the exact term. Yes.
Salty.
Yes. And so I don't know the instances of, did he run into it in the hall? Did he, run screaming through, hey, Descartes is groping about in the shadows? Because remember, Descartes was really respected, right?
Very.
So either way, Descartes finds out about this.
Uh-oh.
And so, yes.
The worst thing that could happen if you badmouth someone behind their back.
But does, Fermat even care?
Probably not.
So anyway, Descartes got so mad, and he started calling Fermat a braggart to others.
Ooh, a braggart. Well, I have to wonder, was it meant for... Is this just two friends who were talking about it and then it got blown out of proportion?
Like maybe they were in Fermat's home office and just having this secret conversation, and someone was at the door with a cup listening.
Or it's another reply all mistake, They send it to one person, and they forwarded it all out to everyone.
Did you hear what Fermat said about Descartes?
Well, I think if I remember this part of the research right, the friend, the intermediary who tells Descartes, he didn't like Descartes either. So I wonder if it was just him trying to throw shade at, I'm not the only one who doesn't like you. Fermat doesn't like you at all. And it felt safe because no one liked Fermat. So he was going to throw him under the bus. It was all right. super rude, I have to say. This started a huge war between Descartes and Fermat. I honestly, based on what I've read from Fermat, I really don't think he cared. I don't think he cared much about what people thought about him in general.
Same, because he didn't publish.
Right.
He just, he did his thing. He was like, I'm going to write you a letter. And
people were, they were pretty open about how they did not like him. And it didn't seem to stop him. He never changed.
He didn't have any friends because he had to sign that HR document.
This is true. So he's like, it's all right. If you hate me, haters gonna hate.
Yeah. And come to my court.
So this was a really dangerous enemy to make because, like you said, Descartes was respected. He was not a prince of amateurs.
In the mathematical community.
And philosophical.
Oh, yes.
But those were linked. I forgot. They were the same thing, so it didn't matter.
Psychological thriller.
So, unfortunately for Fermat, though, this was kind of crossing the wrong person. So, at one point, Fermat discovers a method for finding tangent lines. Now, for those of you who are not mathematically inclined, a tangent line is where a straight line touches a curve at just one point on a graph.
And so Descartes basically turned into a troll and he said, oh, really? You think you discovered this method of finding tangent lines?
You're sounding a little like Hypatia. You man.
Yes. That's exactly how Descartes sounds in my head. And
Research bears it out.
So he shows up with a random curve and he says, find the tangent of this, you man.
And my favorite part of this story, because this is all absolutely correct, and my favorite part of this story is, so this guy's all salty about what Fermat said, and Fermat comes out with something and says, hey, I actually discovered a thing.
Also, I don't care about you.
Right, and Descartes says, well, apply it to this thing that you'll never apply it to. And Fermat solves it really easily. He goes back and he goes, okay, here.
Side note on this, my favorite part about the research for Fermat was that, you explained at the beginning what a tangent line was and all that. And as you were doing the research for this and as we were kind of talking about it, you didn't even realize that you accidentally tripped and fell and taught yourself calculus.
Actually, when you mentioned the word calculus, it got me scared. Because listeners, I reached out and I said, so the research is saying this. This is how I understand it to be. Straight line touching a curve at one point. Is that correct? And yes, I wasn't sure. I had to have you tell me for sure I understood what those words said.
That you taught yourself calculus real quick.
Yes, but when you said that, I immediately went panic mode and said, no, calculus. Again, stigma, right? This is a horror movie. No.
It's a psychological thriller. But so during their argument, you man, Descartes actually had other mathematicians weigh in and he even had them act as referee. Clearly, this was another favorite sport.
Yes, we're going to get our friend to come and play referee in this fight we're having about math, which was a serious thing. And this was sort of a gasp. Did you hear what was going on with everyone knew? This wasn't a secret. Descartes was out there telling everyone. I'm sure he wrote it and then went and showed everyone his letter before he went and sent it off to Fermat. So everyone in the mathematical
he had to
community
make sure
knew.
He had all his peeps behind him. He had to be William Wallace and to go fight Fermat.
But again, right? Again, the fun part of this story is so they pull in a referee because Descartes,
ding, ding, ding.
is telling everyone this amateur, he has no idea what he's doing and he thinks he solved something. So you come on in. I'm guessing because he couldn't find fault with what Fermat said, and so they bring in a referee to act as impartial judge. Well, it turns out that Fermat was right, and Descartes actually had to admit that he had validity.
I just really, in my head, what I'm imagining right now is in this corner, and the mic comes down, right? And the guy's like, total knockout, and so, yes, but Descartes, right? He said something along the lines, after he very grudgingly, I guess based on the referee, admitted that Fermat had validity, he grudgingly says, well, if you would have just explained it clearly to begin with, I wouldn't have even argued about it at all.
Yeah. And so this is such a backhanded kind of admittance of, failure. So yeah, he does have to say he was right, but he doesn't say my bad. He said he was right, but if he kind of had in a way cheated. It's a poke in Fermat's eye because he was an amateur and he didn't understand how things were done in the mathematical community. So it's like in your lovely analogy there of the knockout. It's like someone got knocked out and then stood up and said, well, yeah, you won. But if, you hadn't been wearing this outfit, then, these shorts in particular to this boxing match, then you wouldn't have won.
But he remained, for all of that, he remained salty. He would write to Fermat and he would tell Fermat, listen, your work is so great. Amazing. And then he would turn around and write to other mathematicians and say, do you see how his work was incorrect? Look at this noise.
So
not
rude.
Only, yes. And then he would say, not only is he a second-rate mathematician, he's a second-rate thinker as well.
Dude.
Come talk about groping about in the shadows. He held on to, you don't even know.
If someone was doing that to me at work, we would have words. We wouldn't be writing letters anymore.
Well, my thing is, Fermat, and again, probably because he didn't care, he's got the written proof that Descartes is telling him how great he is.
Right.
He doesn't go out and say, actually, that fool, look what he said. He's just like, say what you gonna say.
Well,
I'm gonna do me.
And unfortunately for Fermat, right, the proof wasn't enough. The community had already made their decision because they liked Descartes better and he had more credence at the time. And he had already, it's one of those things where a rumor has gotten out. And even if the person who started the rumor has to say, it was just a rumor and I lied, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
that thing
it's too late.
Yeah, you can't revoke it. That thing is out there and it's never going to come back. And this followed Fermat for his whole, I say career, but his whole life, really. It's kind of sort of an Edison Tesla kind of a war.
Well, we know how we feel.
Yes. Maybe we can do Tesla in the future.
I want to. I love him.
Fun would that be?
I'm Team Tesla.
Same.
Fermat's work on mathematics, though, was just amazing. In fact, Isaac Newton, who is believed to discover calculus, and there is just, the politics of who discovered calculus, whether it was Newton or Leibniz, is another great story for another time. Leibniz?
Leibniz.
Those two fought for much of their lives about who discovered calculus. We can talk about that later, though.
So are you telling me this prince of amateurs, this person who wasn't actually a blessed mathematician, actually inspired not just calculus, but Sir Isaac Newton?
Yes.
That is pretty impressive for an amateur.
Newton actually credits Fermat's work on tangents.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Which is so the part I taught myself.
Yes.
Wow. I feel really
Fermat
on level with these people.
Yes. He also inspired you.
Yes, he
posthumously.
Certainly did.
Welcome to Beat Fermat, where the math is always right. And now please welcome our host. He's been called Braggart, Prince of Amateurs, that damn Frenchman. But we call him our host. Give a warm round of applause for Fermat. Bonjour, bonjour. Are we ready to do some math? I can do it.
Can you?
Join us every weekday as we find a new mathematician to challenge Fermat. Who will win today?
So although Fermat had some serious issues with a lot of mathematicians, Descartes,
Lots of shade going around.
Yes, and salt.
Yes.
One of the things he's most known for is a positive correspondence he had with Blaise Pascal.
Yes, and this is another mathematician, an actual mathematician at the time. He was associating with a better crowd, I guess, at that point. But I really like this story of Fermat and Pascal. What they ended up doing together was they figured out how to manage risk and probability by tackling this thing known as the unfinished game.
I love that because it's kind of like how together you and I unearth these stories and they're there and they exist, but we get to discover them together.
Correct. You tell me about some strange thing you heard about a mathematician, prying it open a little bit, and then I pry it open further with research.
And you also discover what they wear, except in this instance.
Yes. Really, again, shoddy historians. So before we jump into the unfinished game, I do want to take just a second and pause here to recognize that this is one of those good relationships that Fermat had in his lifetime. Even though they never met, they only corresponded via letter. But it wasn't all salt and shade in his life.
It's true. He actually offered to meet up with Pascal once they found out that they were close by.
Right.
So he said, I would love to meet you because we've been corresponding about this thing. And also, I think you're cool, I guess. And so, but
you might be. Let's meet.
Let's meet. But Pascal's health was actually so bad at the time. Oh man, that he couldn't make it. And just, could you talk about this letter, please? Because I know it meant a lot to you.
When I came across this letter, I felt so good for Fermat. I don't know if he cared at all about it. He probably didn't, based on what I've read about him.
He had to probably, though, because it's not he was going around meeting other people, say, I would love to meet you.
This is true. I don't think he invited a lot of people to come and meet him in person.
Because he can't have no friends. Right? No friends.
Right, because they might end up in court and he might have to try and convict them. So... yeah, he had all this trouble with all these mathematicians who were kind of jerks to him, and he was Rudolph, right? Like no one wanted to accept him and let him play their reindeer games. So Pascal was different in the fact that Pascal really respected him. In fact, he wrote in this letter when he gets invited to go meet him face to face and he's too ill to do it. He explains, hey, I'm really too ill to come and see you, or I absolutely would. But he goes a step further and he says, I would not allow a man such as you to take one step for a man such as myself. And that's how deeply he respected him. Yeah, he said, I wouldn't even want you to meet me halfway. I would come to you if I were in the health to do it.
Man, and you think about what traveling was like at that time, how it's not like
it wasn't grabbing an Uber and just running around the corner. It was a big deal. And it was a big deal for Fermat because, again, most people did really not respect him. So
that's really cool. But the work that they do together...
crazy.
Yeah. It's actually the foundation of all risk and probability as we know it. You think about weather, insurance, DNA in court, it being a 95% match. And as we got into reading these sources, I know we're going to talk about this book a lot, but the unfinished game is so amazing.
So good. Such a good game.
Yeah.
Such a good book. It was a good game, too, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
But the changing of our mindset, we now think of predictive analytics in stuff like social media, Alexa, all of these things as routine. But imagine a time before that happened.
Yeah, I hadn't ever really considered that, when that turning point happened. But clearly it must have. It wasn't just one of those things where, oh, common sense tells us this now. That wasn't the case at all. And in fact, there was so much drama sort of circling this because at the time that they start having this conversation about probability, and they don't even know that's really what they're discussing at the time. They're just tackling some new fun math game. They're surrounded by people who believe that only God could predict the future, that there was no way. We don't know if tomorrow it will be rainy. We don't know what the chance of falling off this thing might be if we get up on top of it. That just wasn't happening at the time. In fact, there are stories about Zeus and Hades and Poseidon rolling dice for the universe. And even though...
So Hades obviously won.
Right, probably not. But, even in the Christian world, it was God determines all. And frankly, even though there were games involved, they were considered games of chance.
Yeah.
There were not... This was completely determined by fate and nothing else. You could not calculate what your odds were in any way, shape, or form.
And then, so Aristotle comes along at this point, and he says that there are different types of events, certain events, like that the sun will rise. And
Granted.
then we've also, well, yes, I'm just going to use that as an example. You can come up with a better one. But probable events, like it might rain. And then also unpredictable, which is like what you talked about was with alleged games of chance.
Yeah, so anything besides that, to believe anything other than those sorts of beliefs that we just mentioned there, it would be considered a form of alchemy or divination. Again, we're back with the dark arts of mathematics. So
no one had to take their owls.
Right. And so this was, they were kind of trucking down a dangerous road investigating this. And people thought they were crazy.
Yeah. And, actually the first known attempt for anyone to try to figure out patterns when whether it's playing cards or dice or whatever it is, but to try to figure out some of these patterns was actually a bishop around, I think, the year 960 or something. I don't know. But it was with card and dice games. But then the church was like, guys, could you be cool and not do that?
Right.
But then Italian mathematicians actually started to try to figure it out, which was really cool.
Well, okay, this brings up a really interesting point that I read. So it's, again, right? People were playing games of chance, but they had no idea how they worked. And I just find that to be hilarious. So, for example, in the pyramids, they found dice that were made from bones, right? So they had dice games. Yeah. And even at that point, they were cheating. They found loaded dice. So I find that really, really interesting.
And, they truthfully, it's just because they didn't know the math behind it would help them make those better decisions in the game. But I think, too, this is kind of cool because I think, and again, in the unfinished game, this was a little footnote that I read, and it just like appealed to me so much because if you think about it, where we start as a beginning math student, where we say, hey, we're going to learn probability, or we're going to learn how to factor, how to add, or whatever, right? Whatever math you're learning, you don't really get a good grasp of it. Like maybe you could solve equations now, but you can't apply it until after you've had some really deep thoughts and time to process and things like that. So it may not be for another couple of years or whatever it is before you actually truly understand it. As a math professor, I understand math better and better and more because I continually teach it to my students, if that makes sense.
Well, my opinion after reading all this stuff is that we're kind of teaching math backwards. That we're going straight for the equations of mathematics itself and the numbers without having any understanding of what we're actually doing with it, which I think is what you're getting at here. Instructors will throw out words like factoring but the students don't understand why they're doing it, or, and it's not that they have to apply it to the real world. Right. It's just an understanding of why we're trying this in general.
And I think, too, that if I were to go into my class and say, throw some dice and figure it out, how much more fun would that be for them to come up with the discovery? Because even with Erdish, right, we talked about it's the discovery and how fun it is to tell people, like, after you finally, look at the book and you see a glimpse of it.
There's an evil spirit. Yeah. Evil spirits, dice. Yes. Do all of that in the math class. And I would have been 100%. I will try and solve that problem, right? You tell me to try and cheat at dice in a math class.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I'm going to be a lot more engaged than if you say, we're going to work on probability today. Yeah. Okay. I'm already disinterested.
Fun. But so not only did they have to work together to figure out all the math behind it, we talked about that they had to prove, my egg example, that it was going to be true always before it could be accepted.
Well, that, and they had to prove it to all these non-believers, right? Who thought they were almost being heretical.
Right, yes,
in what they're doing. So they really had to be sure about what they were doing.
But so the unfinished game is it's a fun problem. Let's talk about it.
Let's do.
We have superheroes. So we like superheroes. So let's use a superhero example.
Okay. So let's choose Batman and Superman.
Cool.
Let's say Batman and Superman they're in an old minefield. Okay. And there are mines all over the place. And they have to disable this minefield.
Like you do.
Like you do, of course. It's been on their to-do list a really long time, but it's boring work. They really don't want to do it, but it's slow.
Feel that.
In the Justice Tower, or whatever universe we're in at the time. So they decide they're going to make a game out of it. What they're doing is they realize that some of the mines explode on impact, and some don't. They're so old they just fizzle out.
Yeah.
So they're throwing rocks at them. Because I can imagine Superman and Batman throwing rocks at mines. So when a rock hits a mine, it either explodes or it doesn't.
Sure.
Right? Superman bets that the mines will explode upon impact. And Batman bets that they won't. And they're playing to best of 5.
Okay.
Okay?
So they throw the first 3 rocks, and boom, boom, nothing.
Fizzle. Okay.
So the score is 2-1 Superman.
Go Superman.
But then they get a transmission that the city's
Wait, pause. X-ray eyes. I feel like he's cheating.
He might
But
be.
continue anyway.
Okay, we're going to pretend that he's not cheating and that it is a
2-1.
fair game.
Score 2-1
Superman. But then they get a transmission. City's in danger! No, we need our heroes! So, but before they go fly or swing or whatever off to save the day, wait, who would swing? Isn't that Spider-Man?
No, Batman. Well, yeah, probably.
Oh, well.
Whatever. We're mixing
Before Batman jumps in his Batmobile, and Superman flies, or Superman carries Batman, I don't know. They need to figure out, because they've only done 3 out of 5, right?
Right.
So they haven't finished the game. It's unfinished, if you will.
Unfinished game.
Yeah. But so they need to figure out how to split the pot of whatever it is that they bet. You know, they need to figure out how to split it.
Right. Fairly.
Yeah.
Fairly. So Superman says, okay, well, we'll just split it on the current score. So I'll take the pot 2-1. You get 1 portion of the pot, I'll get 2. And let's say Robin is there, right? He's the sidekick. So he's sitting on the side, I don't know, munching on a
Talking
candy
to
bar or
Supergirl.
something. He's flirting, you know. But he chimes in and he says, no. That wouldn't be mathematically right. You should not split the pot 2-1.
So Batman suggests, well, listen, we'll split the pile into 5 because we were supposed to have 5. And so
Right.
Superman, you're going to get 2 portions for what you've won. I'll get 1, and then we'll just split the rest equally. And so Robin says, also wrong, while the city's burning.
Right? Right. City is in danger this whole time. So the question becomes, right? Then what's the answer? Because both of those things sounded reasonable to me coming in off the street, and me as a pedestrian
Eavesdropping on this conversation.
watching this going on. So what does the boy wonder know that they don't? He's, he clearly knows something that these two don't. So he says that what you have to do is look at all the possible ways the last 2 mines can go. It's not about the first throws. It's about how it plays out and who would have won in the end.
Right. And so what can happen with the last 2 mines? Well, they could both explode. Superman wins.
Sure.
Neither could explode. Batman wins.
Right.
The first could explode and the second could not, in which case Superman still wins.
Correct.
Or the first could not explode and the second could, in which case Superman wins.
And all of these are equally likely
Correct.
to happen because it's really a 50-50 shot if they
Right.
throw the rock.
Exactly. So if we play every scenario out, Superman actually wins 3 out of 4 times.
Of all the possibilities of,
all the
rocks.
possibilities, and Batman only wins 1 of 4 times. So that essentially means Superman should get 3/4 of the pot, and Batman should get 1/4 of the pot.
Okay, so I'm following you. But hold on a second. Let's say Batman pipes up at this point, right?
Yep.
And he says, but hey, the last two ways the rock can go are the same way because one mine is exploding and one mine isn't. So what does it matter whether the first mine explodes and the second one doesn't, or the first one,
Yeah.
vice versa. So what he's saying is there's not 4 possible outcomes. There's only 3. They both explode, neither explodes, or one explodes and one doesn't. So that means Superman should only get 2/3 of the pot, and I should get 1/3 instead of 1/4, which is bigger, people, by the way.
But Robin says wrong. Order,
Again.
order matters. You actually have to play out the scenarios to determine whether or not normally the game would have stopped when one player clearly won.
And if this is at all confusing to you listeners, trust me, it was for me. And also it was for Fermat and Pascal and the many, many, many mathematicians before them that had the exact same struggle, because logic seems to suggest one thing, right?
Yeah. And here's a really interesting implication. Real probability is at odds with our natural intuition. For example, I want to talk about something called the birthday paradox.
This sounds fun.
Yes. Birthday! How many randomly selected people do you need to fill a room with in order for there to be a better than even, so greater than 50-50 chance that two of them have the same birthday?
So we have a room. How many people...
However big it is.
Right, however big it is. How many people need to be in the room for there to be a better than even chance that two of them share the same birthday?
Correct. So the answer people usually give is 183 from all my field research.
And that is because...
There are 365 days in a year, and 183 is just over half of that, right? So you'd think...
okay. So that makes sense, right? You would need all those people in.
But it's incorrect.
Yes, actually, it is incorrect. The answer is actually 23. If you're surprised, so was I. I do not understand how you could have such a small number for there to be a better than even chance. But I'm not going to reveal to you the answer, because it's kind of like a magic trick. And I had to ask the mathematician to reveal her secrets. And we've now put that on the website. So if you're interested at all in this particular one,
you can see the magic trick too.
But we're not going to reveal it to everyone because, hey, there might be people who want to work it out for themselves. But the point here is that you really need to rely on the actual math and not assumptions, because like you said, the math itself might not actually be what you first think it should be based on logic.
And I'll tell you, thinking about that, we hear all the time about the golden ratio, and it's got this, it's the rectangle that is most pleasing to the eye. And
even I have heard about it because of art and things like that.
And then in doing the research, we discover that it's a lie, that there's no basis for a most pleasing rectangle, nor that they use. Yes, and if you think about what a ratio is a relationship between two numbers. You're 6 to 2, whatever it is. Right. And the golden ratio is like 1.81. Oh gosh, I'm the worst. I can't remember what the golden ratio is. But even so, they're not two numbers that divide evenly to give you this 1 point.
This supposed golden ratio.
So, but anyway, the Unfinished Game has a really good explanation of why and also what the golden ratio is. So definitely you should check it out.
But yeah, essentially what is going on here is you can't believe everything you read with math, right? You actually have to work it out for yourself. So I came across a really good one in the research, and I thought it was really fun. And it was Definetti's game about, and please help me say this. Epistemic probability. So can we play it?
Yes. So Definetti was Italian, and I mentioned that I'm learning Italian, so I'm going to practice my Italian.
Go for it.
Buongiorno.
Good start.
That was me practicing. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, okay.
What % certain are you that you locked your door this morning?
Can I play?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm about 95% sure I locked the door this morning. Host.
Okay. So I have a jar in my hand with 100 ping pong balls in it.
Getting better.
95 of these balls are red and 5 of them are black. So we can pull out a ball, and if it's red, you get $1 million.
Woo! This is so much better than Deal or No Deal. Those are great odds.
We need some kind of game show situation. Okay, or, because there's option 1.
Okay.
Option 2.
This is like a door number 2 thing?
Yes.
Okay.
We can go back to your house and check to see if the door is locked. If it is, you get the $1 million. Which would you choose?
Huh. So I'm pretty sure I locked the door, but I'm not that sure I locked the door, so I would take the jar.
So you're not really 95% sure that you...
I guess I'm not.
This is epistemic probability, because at some point, if we lowered that percentage enough, you should decline picking the ball, and that would signal what's called your rational confidence in the locking of the door.
Okay, so that makes sense. Because if you said to me, I don't know, 85, we have 85 red balls, I would say, no, let's go check my door. So do I get my $1 million?
No.
Come on. Anyway, clearly this isn't meant to be a foolproof way of determining something, but it does help to determine where that percent of confidence is coming from, which again is neat. I had never considered that. It's just something we say now, right? But I've never stopped and actually thought about it.
I am 99.9999999% sure.
Parts of ping pong balls are in there.
Yes. But anyway, back to the unfinished game. Pascal and Fermat each came up with a solution for the unfinished game.
The Batman Superman scenario.
Yeah. And so his solution involves some really complicated algebra, very intense.
Oh, we don't have to talk about that,
I will tell you everything. No, just kidding.
Okay, good.
Fermat's, though, was to list out all of the possible options and count them, kind of like what we just did, where we talked about, the first could explode, the second, neither, all of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and so I think that that's pretty good, because if we kind of rewind back to Air Dish, we learned that the most beautiful proofs and the most beautiful math, right, is the most simple and clear. So to me, coming from the outside, Fermat's example is probably a lot better than that algebraic example, which I probably would not be able to do.
But there again, right, if I go to class and I tell my students, figure this out, what's going to happen? What are they going to, of course they're going to play it out. They're going to try to, that's how we use math to make sense of the world. True,
but there's a caveat here, right? Which is that we know at some point the numbers here, we started really small, right? But at some point here, the numbers can get so large that it would be impossible to do this. Kind of like the Air Dish evil spirit example, where at some point we just need to punch it in the face or find another way to accomplish it.
And that's important to note, because the game can become a lot more complicated rather than the mines exploding or not exploding, which is just you have two possibilities. It could be dice that they're playing with, right?
Sure.
And you have some D&D dice that are like 20-sided,
right?
Intense. Also, rather than 2 players, it could be 3 or 5 or 10. Who knows?
Yeah, that could definitely make the problem a little bit harder. But that is what mathematicians seem to do, I find, is that they start simple, as simple as they can get it. And then they take it to the millionth degree to see if that principle is still true, which I guess is that kind of that unshakable foundation.
Right. And so what I found, man, there's this quote that's in the unfinished game that I really like. And it says, the problem of points is exactly what it was designed to be, which is a question of games of chance. It's a mathematical puzzle that's relevant to the gambler. But it's riddle. But it's not useful in the everyday world. And if we think about where we even went with it, this just started because they were having fun. And so, I hate answering the question, why do we when are we going to use this? Where's math in the real world and all this?
Right.
Because
the classic question everyone asks when studying math.
Right. And I tell them, I don't know what you're going to do and you don't know either. And the other thing is, if we just play around with it a little bit, who knows where we could go?
And that's a really interesting point, is the mathematicians themselves are not looking for any sort of practical answer to something. However, at some point, it's likely that some brilliant new mind will look at that math and realize that there is an application for it that we didn't see beforehand. But the point isn't that. The point at the very beginning is that mathematical intrigue.
Right. It's what we can do. It's the solving of the riddle. I mean, you think about people, how much are they paying to go to escape rooms? Because they love the
game.
Yes.
The game.
Yes.
And this, I guess this is sort of getting to be an unshakable foundation. It's something that we've seen through all the research here. I mean, just for this particular podcast, I found no less than 3 mathematicians who said this particular thing about this topic. But even if we go back, Air Dish said something like this, and Hypatia, right? You love this. You're not thinking about this highly enough. And Pythagoras and so on. They all say the same thing, which is, why are you focusing so hard on how you're going to be rewarded for this or how you're going to apply it, right?
Right. And I think that's a really good place for us to stop. because the next episode, we're going to talk about arguably one of the things that Fermat is most known for, which is his last theorem. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really good segue. So join us next time, guys, for this. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Infinitely Irrational. For more fun, the research and math behind this episode, visit us on the web at www.infinitelyirrational.com. This episode was edited by Mathematical Expressions. This episode was written and narrated by Mathematical Expressions and Kay. Research for this episode was compiled by Kay. See you next time!